In the US, every 60-second, an average of 20 people are physically abused by intimate partners, and this equates to more than 10 million abuse victims. On a typical day, domestic violence hotlines nationwide receive approximately 21,000 calls. These are the numbers by NCADV, National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Welcome to ST World Affair. I'm Sanjeev Tanna, producer and host for today's show. Since 1974, NextDoor solution to domestic violence has provided prevention and intervention services to women, men, children, and teens in Santa Clara County. Now, NextDoor is Santa Clara County's most comprehensive domestic violence service agency. We have two guests from NextDoor, Colseria Henderson, Director of Program. She is responsible for planning, directing, evaluating, providing leadership to all program areas, advocates on behalf of victims of domestic violence in community-wide policy decisions. Beth Williams, Development Director. Beth is Certified Fundraising Executive. She has more than 19 years of fundraising experience and special events planning and program development experience in not-for-profit sectors. Beth, Colseria, welcome to the show. So numbers which I just now ran, Colseria, they are staggering, very shocking. When people talk about domestic violence, it's kind of physical violence. That's a kind of a small definition, but there is more to that, right? Domestic violence is not just only physical violence, right?
Yes, when we talk about domestic violence, we talk about power and control. So largely, for survivors of domestic violence, it may include the physical, what people often think of, but it also includes verbal assault, it includes psychological, it includes sexual violence. It's essentially where you're talking about someone having power over another person and prohibiting their ability to make their own decisions and choices.
So Beth, this is where when the domestic violence happens and you help, the NextDoor help domestic violence victims. Tell us about NextDoor. What are your mission? What kind of services do you provide?
NextDoor Solutions, we started out back in 1974 with a group of women that established a hotline number. What they realized is that women in Santa Clara County just didn't have the resources that were needed for survivors of domestic violence. And so that 24-hour hotline number is still available to this day. We're using that same number.
All right.
In addition to the hotline number, we also staff 24 hours a day our crisis shelter. And then we also have our community offices. And in our community offices, we also provide walk-in crisis counselors available. We also have support groups. We have advocates that can help in a number of ways, from everything from helping them with financial literacy to housing issues. The list goes on and on, but our goal is for those survivors to become self-sufficient and help them through all the barriers that they're facing.
So when you talk about domestic violence, I still feel that society is still not taking this as a serious social issues. I mean, how do you make people more aware of domestic violence? If there is a homicide or criminal or a murder or rape, people pay attention, but nobody pay. I mean, at least to my knowledge, that people are not serious about domestic violence. Okay, so what kind of awareness would you like to see? Our viewers who are watching, what do you want to see? What do you want to say? It must be challenging for you and your company to look for the victims. I know that you work with the law enforcement, and that's where you find most of the victims. But there has to be somewhere where we can bring more awareness to the people. What are your challenges?
Well, you're right, because domestic violence has been a very hushed or taboo topic, and our culture is changing and it's shifting for the better, and that there is this awareness that's happening. People are able to identify and say, yeah, that is sexual assault, and for women to realize they're not the only one, even though it's not publicly discussed as it should be. But we're here for them. NextDoor Solutions is there for them, and there are others that have experienced very similar abuses that they have. But I think as a culture, we're starting to realize that gender equality is very important, and we're all getting behind that. We're all becoming more and more aware of that. So I think our culture is starting to head in the right direction, but it's amazing how recent laws are around domestic violence, and that's a challenge that we're trying to face, is that's something we can talk about, and it's important for youth to understand. It's important for men to get behind, to realize that certain behaviors just aren't acceptable, and those conversations are starting to happen.
All right, that's good. So I want to go through this a couple of statistics. A recent study in New York City found out that 51% of intimate partners homicide victims are foreign born, while 45% were born in the United States. And the second one is that married immigrants women experience high level of physical and sexual abuse than unmarried immigrant women. So the question here is, Calzaria, is that immigrant women are, these are the statistics, okay? I mean, it's not my numbers. They are at high risk of getting exposed to domestic violence. Maybe they face, because they are afraid of their immigrant status, they don't know how to come out of this abusive relationship, and then they feel trapped. Or maybe in some cases, they just don't know the local language. They are just totally new to the system, right?
Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, do you see the same trend? Do you see the same trend in Bay Area also? I mean, do you see that more and more immigrant women, they have been exposed, they have been going through a domestic violence situation? Yeah,
thank you. I mean, I think what you're pointing to is all the additional barriers that immigrant women face in dealing with domestic violence. You're absolutely right. We're not sure that it's really about the percentage of how much more immigrant women face versus other populations, but what we do know is that the barriers that immigrant women face are sometimes non-existent for other women that are born in this country. So, for example, not knowing the law enforcement or criminal justice system, not knowing what the laws are, not knowing that even what's happening to you is a crime is a huge part of that. In addition to that, what rights do you have? You know, what are your ways out, that there are programs that could help you, how to access those programs, and then particularly when we talk about undocumented women, or when we talk about undocumented survivors,
they don't want to come out.
They're scared.
Yeah, they're scared to come out and talk with the law enforcement and everyone, right? And
they also don't know about some of the programs and services because of that, right? Because of that fear of being able to reach out and talk to someone. And so they're often, what we find is they're often very isolated, which is a term we use a lot in domestic violence. So yeah, so I definitely think that you're pointing to a lot of the barriers that immigrant women face, and language access is a huge part. And in the Bay Area, we are dealing with all of that and much more. So
Beth, your NextDoor, the NextDoor, how do you deal with a scenario where victims don't know their rights? They are kind of helpless because of their immigration status. How do you work through that? Do you provide any counseling services other than emergency shelter services? Sometimes they don't know how to pick up the phone also. So how do you find your, I don't know the right word, but how do you look for your victims? I mean, do you work with the local enforcement? How does your program work? How do you find your victims, and how do you provide your services in a bigger picture?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, Calzaria might be able to contribute to this even more so. But we do try to make the awareness, like you said, through law enforcement and through other social service agencies. They're aware of the kinds of services that NextDoor Solutions provides. But we have advocates that will inform the women of as Calzaria mentioned, what their rights are and how to maneuver through the legal system, how we can help them on a number of levels. And that's what we're here for. We're here to communicate with them that there is a way out, and we can help them identify those ways.
Often our survivors are actually talking to each other. So we provide support groups, means for women talking to other women who've experienced this. And in that time, they know other women in the community. Right. And they're able to find each other, as well as a confidential hotline. So we're confidential advocates. So we have a level of confidentiality that's provided by law, by federal law. And so because of that, we are able to give some assurance as to as to protection around that. And so I think that helps too. And our hotline is probably where a lot of that starts, to be able to call and not give your name and information, and just to be able to ask the questions that you need to ask.
Okay. So how do, one of you can answer this, what do you expect from community? I mean, how do we get involved more and more? I mean, of course, one way is the donations, no doubt about it. You must be looking for volunteers also, right? I mean, what exactly do you expect from your community, from our community?
Yeah, well, there are always the opportunities to come out just like you've provided for us, to be able to share, to help educate, because it is startling statistics. When you hear 1 in 4 women will experience domestic violence in their lifetime, and that's a statistic that's in Santa Clara County, and to hear that number and to walk up to your cashier or be sitting in a room full of coworkers, and you can start doing the math and realizing how many people might be experienced or having experienced domestic violence, and know that when you're talking to them, you can let them know that NextDoor Solutions is there for you. And just to be able to have that, our name, our hotline number, or let them know that nextdoor.org, go visit our website. The services are listed there, and there's an escape button on our website. So encouraging the community to share. If they feel like somebody needs to make use of our services, gently let them know, inform that nextdoor.org is where you can visit and visit safely, and we can be there for that person.
So you said escape button. What exactly? It just you just press the button.
There's a button, and it immediately closes the window.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
I see.
so it's a safe place. You know, much like our own offices, it's a safe place. And then for the community, and it's not only the awareness and being able to spread the word about our hotline number and our website, but those volunteer opportunities, as you discussed. There's always a need for volunteers to help out in different ways, whether it's helping the clients with housing issues, which is enormous in this community.
So you provide emergency shelter. Other than that, you also provide housing accommodations. I mean, do you provide housing services for free, or how does it work out? So let's say if there's a domestic violence, they come to your door, you provide them emergency services. But after a while, you just make sure that that person can survive on their own, right? I mean, so how does this housing services work out?
So often survivors will start necessarily in our shelter, or in an emergency situation, as you've discussed. Self-sufficiency, or the ability for them to provide all of the things that they want in their lives for themselves, takes time. And so it's not necessarily immediate, but we do have avenues available. So we have advocates that work with them all for that long journey. The whole purpose is to work with them along their entire journey. And yes, there are very few housing opportunities in this county, but we do work in 2 permanent housing sites in conjunction with Life Moves and Charities Housing to provide services to battered women and their children.
I think we are running out of time, but I think to bring awareness, I think SD World Affair and NextDoor, I think we should combine our force, and maybe we should organize an event, a 1K run marathon. What do you think?
That'd be wonderful.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, we'd love any opportunity.
Beth, Kalseria, thanks for coming down to our show. So thank you for watching SD World Affair. See you next time.